All right, ladies and gentlemen, so the next speaker that we have up is Farai. Farai's coming to us from Standard Bank, so he's representing all the banks and the bashing that's gone that way. He's going to regain some credibility there. So he's going to be giving us a talk about UX for Betterness, not business. Is that the title? All right, so I'm not going to hold him up any longer. So over to Farai.
So the idea of betterness is something that was raised by a gentleman called Ume Haq. He's a very clever man who writes for the Harvard Business Review, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a bit. But initially, I didn't want to put this slide in. I didn't want to talk about work. I work at Standard Bank, but it's been mentioned too many times for me to not say nothing. So I thought I'd just say a little bit. So I work at Standard Bank, and we're the area that I work in focuses on the Standard Bank app. To be clear, we are doing Agile. We love Agile. It's hard, it's really difficult. We've been doing it for about 6 to 8 months now. And all the stuff that Phil was talking about in terms of how difficult it is to do UX, well, it's hard to get Agile right, first of all. When you want to do Agile with Lean UX, that gets even tougher. So we've got a long road to walk, but yeah, we're fairly much in love with it. We're learning to we're shipping software every 6 to 8 weeks. We're shipping updates. So it's changed entirely the way we do things and the way we think about making stuff, which is pretty awesome. I just wanted to put that out there. I just felt like I had to say something about a different position. But nevertheless, done with that. I don't know if you guys you've ever seen this thing. It's by this guy called Philippe Starck, crazy French guy. He's an awesome designer. It's for squeezing the juice out of a lemon, but you may not use it. Because the stuff that it's made of, I think the acid in the lemon destroys it. But the idea is that, he likes to make stuff that looks and evokes emotion, the stuff that Nancy was talking about, so visceral emotion and all that kind of stuff. He does great stuff, but he's got this TED Talk that I was watching a while back where he talks about perspective as a designer. And so what he talks about is this idea that he talks about where you're looking. As a designer, as a person, I guess, as well. That also matters. So he says, if you're walking around and you're just looking at your navel and you're kind of really focused on yourself, the likelihood is that you're going to stumble. You can't see where you're going. You can't see even where your feet are going. If you look at your feet, you'll stumble less, but you still don't have a view of where you are going. There is no direction in what you are doing. If you're looking straight ahead, then you'll move much faster. And you'll be able to face immediate challenges. Kind of like what Phil was saying in terms of what you do with Agile. You are always planning. You don't have like this long-term plan, just whatever's in front of you, that's what you deal with. But you may not see what's coming up. Then he talks about this idea of looking at the horizon, which is the idea that you'll be able to kind of maybe in your peripheral vision keep an eye on what's going on, but you can also see what's coming up. You get a broader, wider view of where you are, and you get some perspective of what's going on. Then he talks about looking up. This is the blue sky stuff. And what he's saying there is that you probably make up some cool stuff, but you might lose touch with reality if you spend too much time looking up. And then he talks about when you look all the way back. So then you're delving in history and pretty much, you're living in the past. As people, as designers, we need to be able to have all of these different perspectives and know how to switch between them. And I think some of the conversations that have been had this morning kind of look at all these different things. There's a lot about what's going on with us right now, and that's pretty cool. What I want to talk about today is more maybe about the horizon view. So this is about where you can see broad and far and get a picture of where you find yourself, what is around you and what is relative to what you're doing. And where you sit in the grand scheme of things as people who are designers, people who make stuff. An important thing about designers is that there are people who make decisions about design. There are also designers. And it's important to note that just because people have been given permission to choose colors and stuff, they are not the only people who influence what you make. If you are an accountant and you cut a budget, if you're a project manager and you cut a timeline, you are making an impact on design. You are making a choice about design. If you're a business analyst and you add fields to a page or remove fields to a page, you are making decisions about design. So there is a much wider gamut of people who are spoken to and who have impact on the things that we make. This is for all of y'all. So like many people before me, I've used this idea of the iceberg to sell UX. UX has been a difficult thing to sell. South Africa, the market is really young, and there's this thing that I used to kind of when I used to work in agencies a lot, and you always have to kind of sell the idea to the client. What is this UX thing? Why must I pay for it? We've been building websites without you. What do we need you now? And so it's kind of to get them to understand what's going on. So it will go a little bit something like this. I'll say, Mr. Client, Mrs. Client. You're typically used to having these conversations where you're saying, make my site look amazing. The challenge is that the thing that you're pointing at is only just the visual part. There is a significant part beneath that, which is all about how the thing works and the thinking behind that. It's the stuff that Nancy's been talking about earlier on, the deeper considerations that actually decide on whether this thing is going to be successful or not, right? And my job as a UX guy is to dive in and to go from the bottom up and follow a process that will allow us to think about all of the important things that we need to kind of consider before we make a thing that's going to be successful for you and your business, right? And we follow a process. And then I show them this. This is the iceberg I was talking about. And so this is the idea that, for those who are familiar, this is very similar to JJG's model of simple planes, which talks about the strategy, the scope, the structure, the skeleton, and the surface. And my conversation will go something like this. So the first thing we do is we need to understand the business goals and the user needs. Right? Why should we build this thing? Next thing we need to do is to understand, if we have understood what the goals are and the needs are, what content and functionality do we need to put in place to make sure that the business can meet those goals and we can meet those user needs? We've gathered up this content and functionality. Then the next step is that we need to create a structure. How do we organize this stuff so that people can find it, find the right functionality, find the right content in order to meet the needs that we kind of discovered? You can see it's there's a foundation, and you build on top. One builds onto the next thing. So next, after that, your layouts and interaction design, which is making choices about how do you organize things at page level. What does a widget do when someone presses it or hovers over it? What happens when I go from one page to the next, to the next, to the next? That's kind of the layout and interaction design phase. Then after that, you deal with the surface. What does it look like, right? So it's not the first thing, but rather the last thing, because you can make things that work terribly, that don't have that foundation, look pretty, right? And those things will not convert. On the other hand, you can make an ugly app, and that will still do business. People will still be able to check out if it's got that foundation right. The surface is not everything. So this is the conversation I'll typically have with a client. And this stuff, like I was saying, this stuff is not the science of rockets. It's based on JJG's idea of the simple planes, the elements of user experience design, which is a great entry. There was a conversation about getting into UX. Elements of user experience is a great book to read, just to kind of get a foundation on making stuff. It's got a lot of web focus. I think his second edition might talk more about mobile stuff, but it's a really great thing to read. But more often than not, if you talk to them about this iceberg thing, people will get it, and they'll want to buy, or they'll want to hear more at least. It's a great vehicle for getting business to buy into the idea of UX. And that's why many people have used it before me, and many people will use it after me. It's great for what my friend JF, we work together, she calls the UX of UX. This is about creating an experience for people who are going to buy user experience design. You kind of have to think, it's kind of meta, but that's what we do. And more often than not, that's business. Business pays for UX. Business paid for your ticket to come here. Business is standing next to me right here. Business paid for lunch. Business likes us a lot, particularly this year. This year has been a bit crazy. Business has been stalking your LinkedIn profile like a crazy ex-boyfriend or girlfriend. And they're probably sitting 2 seats away from you right now thinking about how they're going to offer you a job, tie you to a desk with golden handcuffs. Business is sick. And not just because of the stalking. Business is sick in a fundamental way. And we are the ones, and when I say we, I don't mean just the designers, but as a society, as a planet, we're the ones feeling the symptoms, the pain. And it's something that's worth talking about, worth thinking about as people who make stuff. So I told you about this gentleman, Ume Haq, and that's his Twitter thing. You need to check him out. He's really cool. Now, I've already showed you the ideas by JJG, Garrett, and the ideas that I'm going to share with you today are largely based on other people's thinking. I don't have many original ideas. And primarily, I'll be talking about what this guy talks about in his book called Betterness, which, again, I think you all should read. It really changed my mind about what to do. If you buy it on Amazon and you read it on your Kindle, it has both the words and the audio at the same time. They sync. It's this thing called Whisper Sync. It's like magic, but it's pretty cool. You should get that, put it in your car, something like this. So one of the key questions the gentleman asks is this thing. He talks about this thing, GDP, gross domestic product. Like I said, I want to talk about stuff that's more at the horizon rather than in the making of stuff. Do we know what GDP is? What is it? What is the actual thing, and why is it important? Why is the economics always talking about this, and the IMF? And when GDP is good, people are happy apparently, and when GDP slows down or when it sucks, things are bad. Turns out that GDP is a set of complex equations that economists use to measure the amount of output a country or region is producing. What are you making? And like I said, when GDP is good, everything is awesome. And you hear this all the time. Business wants GDP to be higher. Business wants to make stuff, non-stop making stuff. Making stuff is good. But what is this thing actually measuring? It turns out nothing of real importance to you and I. What are those things? Do they matter to you, to me, to everybody else? Consumption, which is I guess how much we spend, plus what the government spends, plus investments, plus net imports means GDP. Doesn't mean much. To illustrate, I'll give you an example. If, say, the government was to build a residential complex for a man who had 7 wives, for example, and each one of those wives had their own swimming pool and all of these things, say it cost like, I don't know, 200 million rand. Economists would count that as good for GDP. No joke, that's for real. Making that thing is good for GDP, right? This, regardless of how much money has been taken away from public services that will benefit you and I. GDP says that's good, but for you and I, it's nothing, right? GDP only measures, according to what Dume says, GDP only measures whether the engine is revving. That's it. More revving is good. But turns out that, whether the vehicle is moving or what direction it's going in is of no consequence to this number. And yet, this is what is used typically to measure the health of an economy. They're saying this is good when this is happening. So, what gets measured gets managed. And it turns out that we're measuring the wrong stuff. And this is what I mean when I say that business is sick. It's furiously working to make more, bigger, cheaper, faster now, just because it's good for GDP. And when GDP grows, like I keep saying, they'll say that everything is good. Even though the increase of GDP in the example of this man's house actually degrades stuff that matters to us in human terms, right? Public services, they get compromised in terms of that. Other areas of business will compromise the natural world, intellectual capital, social capital, trust, fulfillment, happiness. All of these things are not considered in this. So when we say an economy is healthy, what we are saying is a bunch of economists are happy about some numbers, but it doesn't mean that we are better off in any way. Things aren't good, generally. So in this economic paradigm that hinges on GDP, a healthy economy is one that has no dysfunctions. Dysfunctions are things that are going to slow down or reduce this output. The number gets smaller, everybody gets unhappy. And business's view of what's good and healthy for the economy is not good for us, or the natural world, or for the future. And we're a part of business, like I said. They paid for us to be here, so that probably when we go back, we make sure that output doesn't slow down, right? And we're typically getting asked to fix things that are getting in the way of producing output, to make things more usable, to make them more efficient, to make them more recently, make them more delightful for some reason. That's good for output. Either that, or we're being called in to prevent someone who's about to start a new project from making an inhumane, inconsiderate piece of software that'll probably get in the way of business output. Business has figured out that bad UX is bad for business, and that's why we get called in. And to an extent, we can't complain. We're in. We've got some work. We've been trying to get in for ages. In 2011, so I was in London for about 11 years, and I moved to South Africa in 2011. Before I moved out here, I was looking for a job as a UX designer, and I went to CareerJet, did a search. I got 3 hits. 3 hits. Today, I have had to switch off my LinkedIn alerts because there is a job for everyone everywhere. The demand for UX, the demand for what you people do is far outstripping the supply. It's crazy out there, and this is a good thing. I guess it's a good thing so that we can practice, right? We can practice, we can get better, we can make things. And I guess for that reason we can't complain, but there's just this niggly feeling that I get that, are we doing the right stuff? Are we focused on the right thing? Where are we looking in terms of perspective? At this year's World IA Day, Joel B. shared with us some ideas about positive design. Positive design is an approach to making things better that, more than just focusing on reducing badness, reducing people's problems, offers them opportunities to increase their well-being. It offers them opportunities to increase well-being. It was put forward by some really clever people called Peter Desmet and Anna Palmeyer at the Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands. It's quite a recent idea. It's from, I think probably within the last 10 years, it started to gain traction. And if you Google it, I think their stuff comes up first. They've got a great reference for, how you can use positive design to influence the stuff that you make. And it's a really great way of thinking about stuff, which, it's saying we're not about making things less bad. We're about increasing how awesome things could be. So it's quite a recent idea, but its roots actually come from an idea from about 1906 by a guy called William James, who was a prominent psychologist of his time, who asked a dangerous question of the other psychologists that were around him. And he asked, what if the average person, while mentally healthy, were only living up to a fraction of his or her potential? That's the question he was asking. The reason he was asking this question is because orthodox psychology at the time was saying that for you to be healthy, you must be free of dysfunction. In fact, you should be normal, whatever that was. They had a measure for normal, right? And he was asking whether we should just be trying to bring people from a -8 to 0, or whether we should be thinking about how to get people to that +8. How we get people to a situation, to a condition where they can scale higher peaks of emotional and cognitive function. Not just less bad, but more awesome. And in this idea, positive design has its roots. You need to look that stuff up. Maybe talk to Joel, but it's really some fundamental shifting in what we're talking about. This isn't just about make the thing delightful, add curves, make it more sleek. This is thinking about what can this thing really do for you. So the guys who do positive design, they talk about this idea, and I had the slide up where they're saying, we surround ourselves with design that makes us feel good at a superficial level, but it doesn't actually do anything for us in terms of happiness, and definitely not in terms of what really matters to us. But it does move that GDP thing. So that's good, I guess. So this conventional thinking was saying that health is the reduction of dysfunction to reduce. So any dysfunction that reduces normalcy was a thing that we wanted to get rid of, right? And in a way, it's kind of similar to the economic question that Umair is asking, where he's saying that a healthy economy is one that has less dysfunctions that stop us from creating output. And so what he does is then he puts forward the idea of a different equation. So what he says is, instead of doing this thing on the right, why don't we think about this stuff that he calls real commonwealth, where we talk about natural capital. Financial capital, yeah, the dollars are important, but there's also ideas of intellectual capital. And this isn't just about collecting IP, like having patents, which is seen now as intellectual capital, but it's actually about saying, are we all smarter? That's intellectual capital that a nation can be interested in. The idea of human capital, can we be better people? Social capital isn't about likes and is everyone on Facebook. Social capital is about saying, are we a community in what, at all the different levels? Are we people who are together? There's emotional capital, organizational capital. He even proposes this idea of creative capital. So he's putting together this idea of an equation. He's saying, it's not the answer, but what he's saying is, where is the measure that puts that stuff together? Who's asking that question at a global level and saying, how do we know whether South Africa is well or not, right? Which is a slightly different idea of how to make things. And he calls this idea betterness, right? He says, this is business. It's just about being busy, busyness. That is betterness. That's about being better. And so he calls, the organizations that are involved in trying to promote that, he calls them businesses, and those ones, he calls them betternesses, which is a weird word, but, could get used to it, whatever, right? So what he's saying, and now what's interesting is this quote here. The welfare of a nation can therefore scarcely be inferred from a measurement of national income as defined above. The guy who wrote this, Simon Kuznets, is the same guy who actually defined GDP. In the paper where he presented it to Congress back in 1936 and he said, here's GDP, he said, don't use this to measure how well people are doing. It doesn't work for that, right? He just said, it's just a number, but they were like, yeah, whatever. We like the number, we're gonna go with that. And up until now, we've still been doing the same stuff. So what does betterness look like? What is this thing? So Umair and his homies at the Havas Media Lab used this new equation that he wrote up to kind of create a new scorecard of real wealth. And what they did was they used it to assess 200 organizations and see if anyone was actually generating real wealth according to those terms that were in that other graph. And here's what they found. They found that 90% of organizations can't create any real wealth in human terms. Just not. We're just breaking stuff. That's what we're doing, right? The remaining 10% are beginning, but only in very small ways, to actually start making betterness. These are companies like Kiva, I don't know if you've heard of the microfinance company, the Mozilla Foundation, they make the Firefox thing, Wikipedia, which gives us Wikimedia, which gives us the Wikipedia, Jimmy Wales, Lululemon Athletica. This is an apparel company, a sports apparel company in the States. These are the examples of organizations that he says are creating this betterness. So what they did was that they looked at this 10%, and they asked, of this 10%, what are the things that they're doing that are making them stand out? What is different about the choices that they're making or the activities that they're undertaking? And the difference was in how these organizations make decisions. These organizations were consistently and systematically making choices that maximize human potential as opposed to being just focused on profit and shareholder value. And I'll talk about how they did that in a bit. The idea of betterness is not just about wide-eyed idealism. It's not looking at the sky and saying, I wish things were amazing and let's change the world. But really, it's something that the businesses who are doing this stuff, they are blowing away their competitors in terms of profit. Like they are just light years ahead. So this thing translates to real dollars, but it doesn't just say the dollars are important. It says, let's improve stuff for people or for a certain constituency, and we can also profit from doing this thing. So these folks are consistently, intentionally trying to make things better, and they're seeing huge profits as a side effect. And the difference that these guys found when they did this research boils down to 4 key habits that are practiced by these organizations, and let's talk about them. The 4 habits are ambition, intention, constraints, and imperatives. It is not the stuff of rockets. It is not breaking ground. It's actually things that when you hear about them, you go, duh, but it's how these things are combined and applied that changes how these organizations perform. Because the thing is, those companies were not different from their competitors in terms of the products they have, or the services that they have, or the strategies that they were following, anything like that. They were similar to their competition. It was just about how they made their choices, how they used their resources. That's where the difference lay. So let's talk about ambition. So most businesses have what we call a vision statement, right? Something that they say, this is what the business wants to be in 5 or 10 years. I want to read you some examples. Clicks, South African company, Clicks Group. The Clicks Group aims to create the Clicks Group aims to create sustainable long-term shareholder value through retail-led health, beauty, and wellness business model. Whatever that is. KFC says, our aim is to put a smile on people's faces around the world and give every customer a special experience on each occasion. Our vision is that our jobs will be the best in the world for those committed to serving great food and looking after customers better than anybody else. Woolies says, at Woolies, we know that we have to go that bit further to really make a difference. Putting the customer first is what service is all about. It sounds like UX design. Whether your customer is a shopper in our stores or the store manager who needs a vital delivery, service is about understanding others' needs, being willing to do more than what is expected, and being a good ambassador for the Woolies brand. What's interesting about all these things is that as much as they try to talk about us, you and me, they end up doing what I call wee-weeing. They end up talking about just themselves, what they're going to do, right? What they're going to do for themselves, for their profit, and for their shareholders. It's all about, pursuing this idea of output. Now, here are some ideas or some examples of what business ambitions are. There are this 10%. Here's kind of how they talk about what they want to do. And Dume calls these things ambitions. I couldn't find any South African examples. These ones are all American. The first one is Nike. To help Nike Incorporated and its consumers to thrive in a sustainable economy where people, profit, and planet are in balance. Google says they want to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful to all of us. Lululemon Athletica says they want to create components for people to live longer, healthier, and more fun lives. Can you see the difference between the two? The vision is focused on the organization and what it will do for itself and its shareholders. The visions don't tell you anything about whether they're going to create any real wealth in terms of what matters to people. The ambition answers the question, why are we here, by saying something like, so all the ambitions that I just read, the Nike one, the Lululemon one, they say something like, we exist to create this specific kind of wealth because it has these consequences for people, communities, society, and the natural world, and future generations. This is what they're talking about. This is the difference between those two things. Now imagine if so this is Lululemon's ambition. And because they focus on this ambition, they don't just have stores where you can buy the clothes they make. In their stores, they actually have classes and workshops that you can take to actually improve yourself as an athlete. Because what they're saying is that giving you the clothes is not enough to help you to fulfill your potential. We actually have to get you to that point, and we will offer that. That's part of their business model, and that's what they do, and that's why people stick to them. Imagine if we switched this, and we said, KFC creates components for people to live longer and healthier lives. What would they serve in the shop, right? What new food categories could they produce? And what would a visit to a KFC store be like? It's that difference. It's that switch in mindset. The business models might be similar. They might be interchangeable, but it's just about saying, what are you actually trying to achieve at the end, right? That's the difference. And that's where the ambition comes in. Now, to be sure, none of the businesses with these ambitions are perfect. Some have done some bad things, right? Nike's had that whole thing back in the day about slave labor. So I'm saying they're taking small steps. But what we are seeing is this idea that betterness is a thing that can be achieved. Betterness is a thing that can be good for this GDP thing, while at the same time being better for people and the planet, and for the future, right? And this ambition helps people to make these choices. So the next thing is then this idea of intention. So if a vision statement says what a business is going to be in 5 years' time, they will also have something like a mission statement, which describes what they're going to do on a day-to-day basis to reach that 5 or 10-year goal. So here's some cool ones. One from a bank, because people hate banks today. We do everything in our power to ensure that we provide our customers with products, services, and solutions to suit their needs, provided that everything we do for them is based on sound business principles. Willie says, we understand that we earn the right to exist by providing appropriate long-term returns to our shareholders. We try to meet our various targets and deliver on our commitments. There's a shop in the UK called Safeways, and they say, our goal is to be first choice for those customers who have the opportunity to shop with us. And to achieve this, we aim to be best at fresh, best at availability, best at customer service, and best at product and price. Those are ideas of mission statements. What does best at fresh mean? Is that a thing? Can we do that? Can you measure that? That's what these guys are saying they want to be. All they're saying is, here's how we're going to be better than the next guy. That's what their mission statement is, what they're trying to do. These other guys in this 10% group, they're doing a different thing. What they're saying is, for example, here's a store called Hannaford. And Hannaford says they want to help customers to find foods that offer more nutrition for the calories as they make choices in each of the department stores, right? The mission statement, which says, here's how we're going to be excellent as a business. The intention is fundamentally different. And it says, we will make you better as a customer, right? Or as a person. Through the act of exchange, whatever we exchange, here's what you're going to be great at. And this talks specifically about how you're going to be great, right? So Hannaford's intention to help food shoppers make healthier choices influences how they design their business, right? So they have this program in their stores called the Guiding Stars program. Every single bit of food that you see in their shop has got a rating from 1 to 3 stars based on how nutritious it is. Every single one. There is no question about whether you know what you are buying or not, right? Because they intend to make you an awesome person, they are making those choices in their shops and they're changing what they're doing as a business. None of this is impossible to do in any kind of shop. It's just about saying, is it important to you? Are you going to focus on it? Are you going to try and make people better as a business and try and make profit from that? Betterness wants everyone to be an expert. They want you to do more, to be better, to be faster. It changes the role of the organization from just a person who's trying to shift units at you to someone who's more like a coach, a mentor, a guide, a collaborator. Now, here's an important side note. If you work on products, if part of whatever work you're doing, if you work on products that could never help people enhance their human potential, I'd suggest that you create an exit strategy, whatever you're doing. That's not even a joke, because the idea is that the people in business, account managers, project managers, finance people, whatever it is, they can't make the change. We, the people who make choices about how things are made, what things are made, we are the ones who are uniquely placed to create these designs, to create these products that actually have meaning. That's not to say that we're all going to change business today, tomorrow, whatever it is, but we are the ones who are making the things that the customers are sitting with, right? It's not the other guys who are sitting at the big table. It's us who are making these design choices. So if you have the capability to make things better by design and you're not in a position to move, do something, but get in that place because you're needed, right? So you need to do that and make that choice. So the next piece is, so ambition is talking about who we are going to benefit. Intention is how we're going to make those people excel. Constraints talk about things that we might never do, right? So this kind of correlates to kind of strategy. So I spoke about Click's earlier on. As part of their strategy, Click says, we will develop a competitive and differentiated front shop product offer. Coca-Cola says, and this is great, we are building on our fundamental strengths in marketing and innovation, driving increased efficiency and effectiveness in interactions with our system and generating new energy through core brands that focus on health and wellness. Okay. Now let's listen to some constraints. Woolworths, which is pretty cool. We believe it is our ethical obligation to ensure that our suppliers treat all the animals in our supply chain with respect and in the most humane way possible. We believe animals should have lives worth living. They're choosing that. They're saying that. They will only do business with people who stick to those rules, right? They're making that choice. Google says stuff like, it's best to do one thing really, really well, right? That's focus. Walmart, yes, Walmart. They say, we want to reach a day when there are no dumpsters behind our stores. We want zero waste. They're changing their whole image, right from the strategy, from this idea of wanting to make things better. It's interesting, actually, Walmart is taking a big shift. Walmart are one of the first stores to be running off this gentleman, Elon Musk. He's made this Powerwall. I don't know if you guys have seen it, right? This kind of battery thing. Walmart is one of the first kind of people to actually use that to run their actual stores, not just house, but to run their actual stores. So they're looking to change, their whole image, but it's not just an image thing. It's not like make us look good. It's actually make a difference so that people can trust us. That's what they're trying to do. So where strategy, where Coca-Cola is playing and all those things, where strategy is a plan to reach one or more goals and missions, constraints are actions that a Betterness, as opposed to a business, will never do at any cost ever, right? Because that will stop people from reaching the ambition and the intent that we have agreed, right? Strategies can shift from time to time. They shift from quarter to quarter, whatever the business is doing. Constraints, if anything, accumulate over time. You want to have more and more constraints to what you're doing. So Whole Foods is another American company that deals with food. And their success and the core of their business is around two constraints, right? They will never sell food that contains artificial flavor, and they will never sell food that has artificial colorant. That's it. That's what they do. And they don't do like lots of sales and this much. All they do is they say, if you come to us, we can promise you that everything you get here is going to be natural. And for that reason, everybody loves to go shopping there, right? Everybody wants to spend money with them. All they need to do is to keep finding fresh stuff that has got no weirdness in it, and that's it. That's great business for them. That's not difficult. So when I spoke about constraints accumulating, what was interesting is after a while of doing this and succeeding, the CEO was kind of looking at the product offering and he said, wait a minute, even though we are not selling stuff that has artificial flavoring or artificial coloring, we are still selling stuff that is junk food. And what he's saying is we are selling like crisps and all these little sweet things that don't have all the weirdness in them, but they're still actually just generally junk food. And so they added another constraint and they said, we don't do junk food, right? We only do stuff that's great and nutritious, that doesn't have artificial flavors and doesn't have artificial color. And their business only gets better. People respect them for that and go, yeah, you're making the right decision for me and mine. I'm going to shop with you, right? That's how constraints work. A Betterness uses its learning all the cycles that it goes through and all the iterations that it goes through with its products to decide what not to do in order to avoid compromising its intents and ambitions. The more constraints you have, the better you are getting. The last piece is around imperatives. So to implement strategy, business has what they call objectives, right? So these are tasks that everybody needs to undertake in their day-to-day work. These should be set and reviewed on a regular basis. Again, sorry, I'm picking on clicks today, but they just got like a lot going on with them. So, so some objectives from clicks: to develop a competitive and differentiated front shop offer. We've spoken about that. To create a great customer experience in pharmacies. I would appreciate that. So growing a retail footprint, driving customer loyalty through Club Card, maintaining a motivated, skilled workforce. Can't really argue with many of these. Vodafone says we want to pursue operational performance through cost reduction, and we want to pursue growth opportunities in mobile data. The companies that made up the 10% that's working towards betterness, their success is built on what they say are imperatives. The things that I've just read about, these are things that can shift from quarter to quarter. Wherever the business is going, these things will change, these objectives, right? But these 10% companies, what they're saying is there are things that we will always do and we will never shift from them. An example is Pixar. Pixar says stories always come first. They say that characters must always be believable. And they say that money is not the reason we make films. That applies to every single product they make. No choices. Doesn't matter what month, what year, what quarter, that's always the truth about what we're doing, right? Apple, they never state or write down what they do. Their secrecy has been discussed quite a lot today. But Steve Jobs is known to have said things like, use as few buttons as possible. Use as few components as possible. Make usability natural, effortless, and radically simple. This is true of every single thing they make. While objectives change from project to project, from quarter to quarter, from CEO to CEO, imperatives apply everywhere to every product, not just this month, not just this quarter, but always without fail. That's the difference, right? It's always. Pixar's imperatives are what gives it its Pixarness. It's what helps them to define what is really good work and that is understood by everybody. It is not a mistake. It is not a thing that shifts. It is the truth about the brand, the business, and goes right down into the product. So these ideas about ambition, intention, imperatives, and constraints and imperatives, are the behaviors that these organizations have that allows them or that they undertake to make them different from other people who are doing exactly the same thing as them in business. Other people making computers or making phones don't make the decisions that Apple is making, right? So if we need business to become betterness, and designers want to make things that not only lack dysfunction, we want to do positive design. We don't want to make things that lack dysfunction. We want to help people to actually fulfill their potential. What's the holdup? Why is everything not awesome yet? Partly I'd say because business doesn't like change. If a certain set of circumstances proves itself to be profitable, business is going to fight to keep things the same until something breaks or stops output. And even then, they may look for the easy way out rather than doing the right thing. They'll look for the easy solution. One of those things is rent seeking. So rent seeking is this weird thing that I learned about when I was reading this book. And the example the guy gives is about a supermarket called Tesco in the UK. So the success of a supermarket, like many other retail stores, depends on real estate. Where are they placing themselves, right? And this is what Tesco does. Tesco goes and finds real estate where it could open a store or where its competitors could open a store. They buy it and they just keep it. They don't do anything with it, right? Only so that the competition doesn't come and build there as well, right? And by stopping the competition from also opening a shop, they're saying we're doing better because we're stopping those guys from doing stuff, right? That's business. Microsoft, they earn more from royalty payments from Samsung. So they got about $2 billion last year from Samsung through royalty payments, just royalty payments, right, for patents. So apparently it takes 200 patents that Microsoft owns to make an Android phone, 200 patents, right, for which Samsung pays $2 billion every year. That is more than the Xbox, Xbox Live, the Skype, and the Windows business all put together, right? And all Microsoft has to do is to give Samsung bank details. That's it. No work. They're just chilling. They're doing nothing. But that is known as, or spoken about as, generating intellectual capital. So when Microsoft bought Skype, they bought 50 of these patents. And that's like, oh yeah, we're amassing intellectual capital. Doesn't benefit anybody. They're not generating anything of worth. All they're doing is just waiting for somebody to pay them for a thing that they're just holding a piece of paper for. So why would business change that? There's no reason for them to do that. And we are probably the least qualified people to actually make them think about, differently about what they want to do. right? But what we can do, as I was mentioning before, is to influence the products that we create. And my contention is that by helping business to make good decisions about products every day, through marginal gains, we can make a little betterness. This idea of marginal gains, small changes, is an important one. So there is a cycling team, the British cycling team. They had never won a Tour de France. And they got a new project director, and they said, "Guy, you got to take this team. You know, they've got to get the yellow jersey. They've got to win the Tour de France." And what he did was to implement a strategy of marginal gains. His belief was that if you improve lots of little things by 1%, it will all amass to kind of a remarkable change, right? And so what he did was the logical stuff. So, you know, they all went on nutrition diets. They all had weight training. They changed the bikes. They changed the weight of the tires. They changed their frames. They experimented with all kinds of stuff. Then they took it a little deeper. They started experimenting with how you sleep. They found pillows that get the most sleep for each rider. So they get their own pillows. They got them their own mattresses. They take these pillows and mattresses with them on the road when they fly. Wherever they're going to ride, they take the same stuff so that they sleep on the same stuff, right? They're learning how to wash their hands so that they don't get infections and they don't get flus and colds and stuff like that. That's what they were improving. They made lots and lots of these marginal gains. And this guy was like, look, in 5 years' time, if we keep doing this thing, 5 years is a long time to be doing that. In 5 years' time, if we do this, we're going to get and win a Tour de France. They did it in 3 years. A couple of years after that, within that 5-year period, they took 70% of the medals that were available for cycling at the Olympics. They were kicking ass, right? And again, it's through this idea of marginal gains. We typically think, oh no, I need to change a massive thing so I can make a change. It could be just about marginal gains, lots and lots of good decisions. And this is where that ambition, intent, constraints, and imperatives becomes important, because that can help us to make lots of small decisions, right, that ultimately could result in this remarkable change. That same cycling team is at this thing called the Giro d'Italia right now, which is like the Italian Tour de France. And one of the riders, this guy called, I think his name is Richard Poole, he's actually sleeping in like a huge caravan, like these American motorhomes, they call them RVs or something like this. He's sleeping in one of those every single night because they're experimenting with the idea that if we don't change where you sleep, because if you move from hotel to hotel, you might take your pillow mattress, but everything is different. And they're saying, if we change nothing, right? Does that make you a better rider? Those are the kinds of experiments they're doing. And all those things allow them to understand all these marginal gains, things that can make things better. So I reckon that by injecting those 4 habits, ambition, intention, constraints, and imperatives, right, into part of our design process, maybe we could kind of find a way to make these marginal improvements in what we're doing that might have this, you know, this improvement in terms of betterness, right? So here's how I'd use it. Maybe we could modify that iceberg story that I gave you earlier on. And we could have a conversation like this with our client. So we could say, you know, at the first level, we're asking the question, why should we build this thing, right? But instead of saying, what's the business strategy, we could be asking questions like, what are the ambitions, intents, constraints, and imperatives? This does not ignore user needs or user goals or their motivations. It just talks about them very differently. So we could do a thing that says something like, the whatever product name exists to create a specific kind of wealth for whichever user, so whoever your persona is, so that a named consequence will happen for that person. For business, this will result in whatever the business wants. It's just more about including the factors that matter to people into the choices we make about design. This could be a way of creating something called a product ambition. A product intent could be something like this, which says that by using our product, whatever it is, our customer will excel at whatever the thing is they want to do better. And for the business, this will result in some sort of business gain. Again, it's just a shift. We're not changing everything we're doing. We're just including the factors that matter in the work that we are doing on a day-to-day basis. And we're the people who write this stuff. Nobody else cares about this stuff in the products that they're making, right? The product intent I've spoken about. Product constraints. So we could say something like, to deliver on our ambition and intent, our product will adhere to the certain constraints. So for me, and I'll talk about this, this is kind of a banking example, but things like don't ask customers for information we already have. I'm sure you guys are tired of this thing, where you walk into the bank and they go, oh yeah, hi, and you give them your card. This is proof that you bank with them, and they go, yeah, sorry, can you fill this in the form? And the first thing on the form is asking you your name. And it's like, dude, you know who I am, I've got a card, I bank with you. You keep asking me for stuff that you already know. That's a constraint you can put in your system. You can stop wasting people's time. A lot of people go to the bank at lunchtime, and they spend half that time trying to reprove things that the bank already knows about them. We are wasting people's lives. This constraint could stop that. If it needs a visit to a branch, don't ship it. Don't put things into your software that are going to require people to go to a branch to finish them off. That just shouldn't happen, right? No hiding caveats behind asterisks. This is a pet peeve of mine. This idea of 50% off star or, free star, that kind of stuff. That just should not happen. That's befuddlement. You're trying to confuse people, hiding things. Take it away. It should not be a part of what we make, right? That will improve. That will improve people's lives, right? In terms of imperatives, we could do a thing like to say, to achieve and maintain the standard or quality that we want to be known for, we will always, and again, this is bank specific, we will always be explicit about fees and charges. This doesn't always happen. You don't know what's going on, right? Neither do I, by the way, right? This idea of seek answers before asking questions. So this is the idea that a bank is always trying to, so if you want to sign up for something, there's this thing that they call FICA, right? You have to prove that you are who you say you are, right? But before the bank asks you too many questions, maybe they could go and find stuff out. There are lots of databases about you that would scare you right now, right? But the bank has got access to those things. The bank can talk to Home Affairs and say, is this the person we're talking to? They could talk to credit bureaus and they could fill in your address, do you own a car? All of that stuff could be populated before we ask you as a customer, right? And this is the idea of we should always seek answers ourselves before asking you a question. That makes life easier for you, right? And maybe that will make you a better customer for us, right? Illustrate and explain financial products plainly. Like there's a lot of weirdness around credit cards and stuff, right? That people just don't know and understand. And we can say that we want to say that plainly. And what is found is, banks like Simple in the States, when you are plain with your customers, when you are charging them and they know you are charging them, they're okay with that, right? They will stay with you. It's not like they'll run away because they now know that you're charging. Right? It's when you're charging them and they don't know what's going on, that's when they're going to go away. So it's kind of this chicken and egg. We're saying, well, let's be transparent, but if we're transparent, people will run away, right? It's a weird thing. But these are the kinds of things that you could put into the design, into the work that you are doing, that take the principles of those companies, right, that are doing that 10%, that might, help to make an improvement in terms of betterness, right? So this was the iceberg, and so once you've done that, I explained how, everything builds on everything else. If you've got that base right, everything that you build on top of that maybe will be a little bit different, and maybe you can get those marginal gains that will lead to the betterness, the improvement of business that we're looking for. So I spoke about the small changes. I just want to share with you a quick idea. Can I get 5, 2, thing? One, out. Okay, cool. So I've shared with you a bunch of ideas, but they're all theories. I haven't tried it. It's just this thing I read, and I thought it would be interesting to share and kind of give a different perspective on why we are here in terms of making stuff, why we're being asked to make stuff, and the impact that we can have. But I want to share with you an example that talks about how this is practical, and why it's something that is actually economically, logically, just going to be the next step of evolution in terms of the things that the business is asking for. I'm just asking that we get a head start on that, right? It shouldn't happen to us. We should be making it happen. Let's talk about coffee. Coffee beans, sugar, milk, right? As a commodity, that coffee cup is really, really cheap because that bag is probably worth cents, right? When somebody takes it, packages it like this, the price of coffee goes up a little bit, right? It's going to cost you a little bit more. When somebody takes those 3 things and puts them in that sachet, the price you pay per cup of coffee is pretty steep, right? As somebody turns this thing into something of a bit more value by customizing it a bit more, they make it a little bit more expensive and you have to pay a little bit more for it, right? When it comes like this, you don't even have to add water. Just bring your cup. It's cool, right? That is, in fact, the cup will probably drop out of the bottom of this thing, right? That's, they keep increasing the value, customizing, make it simpler, but it becomes more and more expensive as we go along, right? And then there's this, right? Vita. Or is this Vita? Yeah, that's Vita. When you go into Vita and they go, hey, and they do a thing, and then you buy a thing and you leave, and they go, hey, and it's all good. It's an experience, right? Right? It's the coffee experience. It's not just about the. There are people who drive out of their way into traffic so they can hear that shout. That's the thing that people are looking for, right? My missus loves Starbucks. This is an actual true Starbucks store. I don't know where it is, right? And we're in the UK. That used to be a coffee order. That's a tall vanilla soy latte that is extra hot and white. I don't even know what all of that stuff means, right? But that's how she liked her coffee, and they could make it like that, right? There are more adjectives that you could add to that, but that's just how people like it. This idea of customization is what people are seeking, right, in what you're making. What this progression that I've just shown you, it's called the progression of economic value. These 2 guys called Gilmore and Pine. They put this thing together when they talk about the experience economy. And what they're saying is, as a thing becomes more and more different and unique, right? As it fulfills a more and more specific customer need, its market value increases, right? it becomes more and more expensive as it becomes more and more like the thing that you think you want, right? They modified this in 2011, and they added an extra piece, which is, after the experiences, they added this thing called transformations. Because what they found was the next level of service is a thing that actually changes who you are. It doesn't just make you happy because you got that coffee or because everyone said, hey, it's something that can actually make a difference to the kind of person you are. The perfect example of that is this thing, Nike Plus, right? Nike were making shoes at a time where they were saying, look, these shoes might make you jump like Jordan, right? These ones might make you run really, really fast. And we'll give them to you, but that's about as much as we can do. They made Nike Plus. My missus had always wanted to run. She bought the shoes, but there was no running happening until she downloaded this thing. And what it does is that it coaches you. It asks you, what do you want to do? Do you want to run 5, 10, 20 Ks, half marathon, whatever you want to do? And then it says, okay, I've got a plan for you that is going to be 8 weeks long, and I'm going to take you from sitting on your couch to running 5 Ks, right? She did it in 8 weeks, right? Using this app every single day. And when you listen to this thing, there's a lady's voice in there that's going, keep going, you're doing the thing, or whatever it is, and it's motivating you through the process until you've actually finished it. What they're selling there is not a shoe, it's not a shirt. That is, they're selling you your ability to run 5Ks. That's what they're selling you. That's transformation, right? They're actually changing your health, they're improving human capital, and they make money at the same time. This is why I'm saying that it's a logical thing, right? And this is all about design. It's all about what we do. It's all made, these choices are made by people like this, right? And that's my call to action, is just to say, let's do this stuff. We may not all have the privilege of making Nike Plus, but we have the opportunities to fulfill our potential as designers. And for me, I'm hoping that I've convinced at least some of you, right, that designing products that help other people fulfill their potential helps us to fill up our potential. And unlike any other role in business, we have the unique opportunity to make this choice, to make things that actually generate wealth that is meaningful to everybody. And in the long run, these small design decisions that you make might actually change business to betterness. That's my contention, that's my challenge. So let's do this. Peace.